Grr, arg.
Hey guys, welcome back to yet another edition of the Mixtape Podcast, a podcast dedicated to discussing film from a screenplay writer's perspective. I'm your host for this time around. My name is Marcelo Nostroza, joined as always by my fellow co-host, Dean Stark. And on today's edition of the show, we'll be talking about the 2019 film entitled Dr. Sleep, written and directed by Mike Flanagan. With that, as I do every week, I will pass it over to Dean so she can take us through this film.
Dr. Sleep is based on the book of the same name by Stephen King. And around here, we love Mike Flanagan, don't we? We love him. We adore him. Yes?
Yes, we give Mike Flanagan jazz hands around here.
We're his little cheerleaders. We love him. Okay, if you don't know what Dr. Sleep is, it is this. Years following the events of The Shining, a now adult Danny Torrance must protect a young girl with similar powers from a cult known as the True Knot. So the opening scene, it is Florida 1980. And the one thing I like about this movie is they have title cards. Marcelo, they have title cards.
Guys, title cards for screenplay writers, at least for me and Dean, those are amazing for us because there are so many projects out there who think that the audience can automatically understand where you are every minute. So title cards come in massively handy. So yay for title cards.
I just like being told. I don't want to guess. Am I here? Am I there? Just tell me where I am and just tell me what the year is. That's all I want to know.
Yeah. Just what a waste of time.
So we meet a little girl and she's so cute. Oh my God, she's super cute. And her name is Violet. And she wanders off from her parents' picnic and she walks down like a little forest path and she finds a woman sitting by the lake on her own. And this is Rose the Hat, or I'm just going to call her Rose because I'm not going to keep saying Rose the Hat because that's going to annoy me. And it is played by Rebecca Ferguson. Let's just take a minute. Let's just take a moment to appreciate the astonishing greatness that is Rebecca Ferguson, not just in this movie, but in every single thing that she has done. Yes. Can I get a hallelujah?
Hallelujah. Or how about this? Let's observe a moment of silence.
That may not be the best thing on a podcast, but I think people know what we're getting at. So anyway, this is Rose. And Rose, she goes, I'm going to show you a magic trick. And she shows the little girl a magic trick. And the girl's like, oh my God, okay. And we think she's nice. Oh my God, Rose is so nice. And then the little girl looks to her right and there's like a random person, like an oldish guy standing there staring at them. And she's like, and then she starts to get nervous. Now, Violet is like 5 or 6. She's super cute. And then more and more people start standing there staring at Rose and Violet. Violet stands there and she gets a little bit scared. She goes, I need to go back to my parents. And she says, oh no, Rose says, no, they're our friends. It's okay. And then Rose grabs Violet and her eyes glow. And then the people that are staring at them basically pounce. You don't see any them doing anything to her, but you know that she's gone. But the opening scene is good because it introduces Rose, and the fact that her eyes glow, it tells us there's something otherworldly and supernatural about her, which is, again, showing, not telling, which is something we love around here. So, and Violet, that's going to come back later, so that's kind of a setup. What do you think?
This setup was absolutely fucking crazy to the nines because, like Dean said, Mike Flanagan did such a good job at setting up the world, and the introduction to the big bads in this episode, led by Rebecca Ferguson, is so good. And the way that Rebecca Ferguson coaxes the little girl to make her believe that her hat has magic things in it. The 6-year-old girl starts looking around. The way that Mike plays it is wonderfully. But Mike does just a really, really quick pan to them pouncing, and then he switches over to a shot of flowers. It's an amazing start to this movie, for sure.
Mike goes hard on this. You know why he goes hard? Because he kills kids. Not many directors kill kids in movies, but he does, and I appreciate that. I know that's morbid, but I appreciate when directors go, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just kill kids. Let's do it. So now we go to the Overlook Hotel. I just want to say that if people don't know this, Dr. Sleep is a sequel to The Shining. So maybe we should have mentioned that, but I don't think you would be listening to this if you didn't, or you haven't already seen the movie. So now we go to the Overlook Hotel and we meet Danny, who is 6-7 years old, who iconically rides his tricycle along the iconic carpet of the Overlook as per The Shining. And he stops outside a door 237. It opens slightly and all we see is darkness, and then slowly emerges like an old, naked, corpse-like woman. And we just see like just a little bit, just enough to get fucking creeped out. And then Danny wakes up in his bed, still the same age, and his nightmares are basically manifesting for him, and he thinks he sees the old woman in his house now. But he won't talk about it because you understand why. He thinks he's making it up. He thinks he'll be told that, no, that's not real. And he doesn't really even know at this point he has an ability. So I like the throwback to the Overlook Hotel. I like the throwback to The Shining. And I like the throwback to the fact that we have to go back to the beginning to see how this all started before we see like Danny as an older dude. So thoughts?
The thing that I like most about Mike Flanagan's storytelling is that he uses flashbacks in a very specific way. He uses flashbacks to inform the story that he's telling. We get to see what Danny's life was like after the Overlook Hotel. He layers the story in such a specific way.
So now Danny is a few years older, not much, maybe like 10 or 11 years old, and he's sitting on a park bench. And a man sits next to him. His name is Dick. And we learn that this man taught Danny that he has a gift. He has psychic abilities. And Dick helped him basically open them up. And then Danny says that the ghosts at the Overlook Hotel are still trying to reach him and he's struggling to keep them out. So Dick explains that Danny's abilities are the most powerful he's ever seen. So basically when Danny was at the Overlook Hotel, he was like a spotlight for the ghosts, meaning he was a beacon and they were drawn to his light because they kind of knew that he was there. And then he teaches him a trick. And this is my favorite part of the whole thing. Dick teaches him a trick to, when the ghosts try to bother him, to put them in a box in his mind and lock it. So, and we do this beautiful, Mike does this beautiful shot of, we see it, they look like almost like coffins, and then it opens and then he just imagines the ghost going in there and locking the box, and then it's just locked in there and the ghosts don't bother him anymore. I love that. It's compartmentalizing, but it's on another level. I love that. And then we hear Danny's mom calling him, and she runs across the street, and Danny gets up from the park bench and Dick isn't there. So basically that signifies that Dick is actually a ghost and only Danny can see him. Again, it's showing, it's not telling. Nobody in this movie ever told us that Dick was a ghost. But just by that shot, we knew that he was a ghost. So we know that Danny has an ability to see all ghosts, and he's not afraid of it. He's only afraid of the ones that kind of scare him. But any other normal ghost he's okay about. But I love that scene because it gave us so much information, but information that we needed for the rest of the movie.
Everything that Mike does in this scene is basically dropping a hat on the ground for things that will come later. But I also love what this scene says about the way that an individual can mentally put their traumatic events in a box so they can move forward with the rest of their lives. But of course, this movie is taking a horrific event and putting it in the box so Danny Torrance can move on with his life to the best of his ability. That scene by Mike works on two levels. It's just really, really wonderful craftsmanship.
Yeah. So the next scene is Danny's at home when he walks into the hallway and he sees in the bathroom the old woman ghost sitting in the bathtub, the same one that was at the Overlook Hotel. So he steps in to the bathroom and closes the door. Now, Mike keeps the camera outside. We don't go into the bathroom, so we don't know what's happening. But as soon as Danny closes the door, we hear the ghost scream, and then we get flashes of Danny using this new trick of opening the coffin and then closing the coffin. The ghost's gone inside and locking it. And we know by the ghost screaming that the ghosts don't like it. They don't like it. They get pissed off.
I love the way that Mike introduced putting Danny's ghost into a box in the previous scene with Doc on the bench, and most directors wouldn't trust the audience, and they would actually follow Danny Torrance into the room and show Danny Torrance dealing with the fucking naked woman, and actually show young Danny Torrance putting the naked woman in the box. But I love the way that Mike trusts the audience to understand what's happening here.
Exactly. He's trusting that the audience are going to put two and two together. He never treats people in anything that Mike does. He never treats the audience like they're dumb. He always treats them with the horror community with massive, massive respect. So now we've got another title card, New Jersey, 2011, and we meet older Danny, which is played by Ewan McGregor. So he's in his 40s, and he's an alcoholic, and he starts fights in bars, and he does drugs, and he's just like he's not put together. He's just basically falling apart. And then the next morning, he wakes up next to a naked girl, and then realizes he has no money. And he's like, "Oh no, she's stolen my money!" And then goes to her wallet and takes the money out of her wallet. Dick the ghost appears, basically telling him, "Put it back." And I'm sitting there, it's like, imagine doing things that aren't right, and then having a ghost appear, like going, "No, stop that." Oh my god, that would actually people need that. I'm thinking about it now. I'm like, maybe people need that. Maybe people need the voice of reason, a ghost to appear and be like, stop that. Do not do that. Stop that.
Yeah. No, that would actually scare the fucking shit out of me. I really like how Danny deals with his power to shine by drowning himself with alcohol. I really like the way that condition to shine parallels with the way that people deal with addiction in their real lives.
So now we're in Long Island, New York, and a young girl sits in a cinema. I fucking hate this character. Anyway, she sits in a cinema. An older man sits next to her saying, "Oh, you look as young as you do in the photo." And she goes, "Well, you look older than, your photo." He puts his hand on her knee and she's like, "Can we just watch the movie first before we go?" So we know that this is some sort of a Tinder hookup thing, but we don't, from her perspective, we don't really know what's going on, but we know what he wants. Now, Rose is sitting in the back with her basically, I want to say like co-pilot. So we go back to the girl sitting next to the guy, and she tells the man to sleep, and he does. And you're like, oh, wait a minute. What? Wait a minute. And then she's like, and then she goes sleep deeper, and you can see him kind of falling asleep deeper. She cuts into his cheek. And you're like, what the fuck is going on? And then she tells him, every time you see this cut in the mirror, you're going to yell, "I like little girls." And you're like, oh, he's okay. And then you're kind of like, oh, I like her. You won't, but you like her now. So as she leaves the cinema, Rose appears, and the girl tries to do her trick on Rose, but it doesn't seem to work. I would like to bring up something that happens later that I didn't like, but I will ask you about. But what did you think about that scene? It's just a recruitment scene, basically.
It was a great scene to show what this fucked up individual can do to other people. And I love the way that Mike introduced her. He introduced her as a victim, but as the scene goes on, you find out that she isn't the victim. She's a predator. As the movie goes on, as Dean has said, she's fucking mousy and whiny and dumb and stupid.
Yeah, I fucking hate that character. So now we've got another title card, Anniston, New Hampshire, and we meet Abra, who is having her 5th birthday party, and a magician is doing a trick with spoons, and Abra says she can do it, and they all kind of, that's really funny. Later, her parents go into the kitchen and see all the spoons just hanging on the ceiling, not from anything, they're just hanging, and they're like, what? Abra walks in, and they all fall to the ground, and she giggles. Again, it's showing... She never said she did it. This is what I love about this writing from Mike. She never said, oh, I did that. She giggles. And he leaves it up to the audience to go, oh, she did that, right? I love it. I absolutely love it. So we quickly switch to Dan, who abruptly wakes up, and then to Rose, who basically is walking down the street. She stops in her tracks as if feeling something happen. And I like that because what that shows, again, Mike never tells us anything. It shows that what Abra can do, when Abra uses her powers, Dan feels it and Rose feels it. And that's just simply shown in a couple of shots. We follow Rose into her epic trailer. I want to live there. I know it's a trailer, but it's really like Bohemian. It's fucking great. Where she has the girl from the cinema. She's kidnapped her, put her in the trailer, and we learn that the girl is a pusher. And then Rose offers her an extended lifespan. So a pusher is basically someone that just tells someone to do something and they can just control them. They can do it. And Rose wants to recruit as many people with abilities to expand her group as possible. And to do that, she offers them extended, not eternal life, but just like an extended life. And like, who would turn that down?
Abra's introduction is quite wonderful because the actress who plays Abra does it so well, and everything that happens to her before she meets the grown-up version of Dan Torrance can be boiled down to, oh, this is a young girl who just has some mental problems, or she just has but she just has an imaginary friend. But I also love the fact how Mike's storytelling technique is really, really wonderful because, as Dean has said multiple times throughout this episode, Mike shows you story points. He trusts the audience like implicitly, and I really, really wish that more storytellers would do the same thing. And I also love the fact that once slutty version of Jen Lindley is introduced to Rebecca Ferguson's soul eating group, that Rebecca Ferguson is like a Rebecca Ferguson is like a sleazy salesman. She actually entices her with an amazing carrot, but she doesn't tell her about the fine print.
Yes.
Right? She entices her with power,
yes.
but she doesn't tell her the fine print, and it's absolutely wonderful how Rebecca Ferguson plays this character because she draws you in. She is magnetic. She's amazing. It's her performance in this film is so wonderful because she just draws you in with everything that she says.
You know what I would love? I would love a movie based on Rose the Hat, like her life, like a prequel movie, just on her, like how, because there's no information on her. We don't know how she became how she is. We don't know when she was born because they've got extended lifespan, so she could have been born in fucking 1900s. Like, we don't know. I want a movie on her. That's what I want.
Yeah, but listen, a movie on her would be fine, but would you accept anybody else but Mike Flanagan doing the movie?
Yes, but I wouldn't accept anyone else playing the role but Rebecca Ferguson.
I don't want anybody else playing Rosa Hat except Rebecca Ferguson. So I'm with you on that 110%.
Yep. And that's the only thing that I kind of didn't like about the movie, because I love this movie, was you didn't get much background on like I call them Death Eaters. Let's just call them that. On the Death Eaters, on the Soul Suckers, on the Soul Eater. You don't how did this begin? How did they know they could do that? Like, do you know what I mean? And they were really interesting to me. They were the most interesting part of the whole fucking movie. I loved them as villains, but I wanted to know more about them.
I do understand where you're coming from by wanting to know more about the characters, but that wouldn't have been possible without Mike layering the story and the characters so well.
Yeah. So now we're in Fraser, New Hampshire. Dan steps off the bus into the cutest little American town I've ever seen. And just so everybody knows, I'm obsessed with like small town America. It's so cute. Just these little towns, it's like 5 little streets, like Stars Hollow from Gilmore Girls. That's what I want. He stamps off the bus into a little cutesy little town and meets Billy. And Billy basically sets him up with a room to rent, and sets him up with kind of everything he needs in that town. And then we switch to Rose and her basically disciples. And Cinema Girl's lying on the ground and they're about to do a ritual. And she says to Rose, "Is this going to hurt?" So they do the ritual. And what I really liked of this movie is one of the characters is named Grandpa Flick. Now, that actor is actually Lurch from The Addams Family. And Rose opens a mysterious container and steam comes out of it. And she says, "This is Violet." And you're like, what? We know Violet. Violet was the girl. How can this be? How did she get the But that's the thing. It's never said. That's what I want to know. It's never said how they do. Well, actually, it is said how they do it because that's later on. But how they came up with the contraption and everything, I don't know. I'm curious about like villainry stuff. Anyway, opens a container. It's Violet's. They call it steam. I call it the soul. So they've put her soul into it and they breathe it in. And the cinema girl breathes it in too, and she basically convulses, and because like it doesn't sound like it feels nice. But that's the same. But that's a setup. The steam, the canister, like that's a whole setup.
Yeah, I love the way that we basically get to see how these fucked up soul eaters actually breathe in people's soul and their life force to maintain themselves. It's an absolutely wonderful scene.
Dan wakes up and it's just a close up of his face, and we see a fly. He sees a fly on the wall, and he's like, "What?" And you don't think anything of it. You're like, "Oh, a fly got into his room. Whatever. I'm in Australia, right? Not that he is, but there's fucking flies everywhere. It's not a big deal." And then we see an arm around him, like someone's in bed with him. But it's not a normal, it looks like a corpsey arm. And you're like, oh no. And his eyes widen because he knows. And he slips out of bed. He turns around and there's this dead girl. And whoever the makeup artist was, oh my God, yes, this was creepy as fuck. Who's a ghost with her dead kid in the bed because he's a psychic and he's a beacon and they're drawn to him. Dan jumps out of bed. They vanish. And this is why he drinks. He drinks to dampen his ability because he doesn't know how to control it. That's the problem. It's not that he has it. It's that he doesn't really know how to stop them from coming because he just wants to fucking live a normal life. Hey, I get it.
I think that this film pits Danny Torrance as a unwilling participant because Danny Torrance does not want to step up to the plate and face these demons. He's scared of individuals, of spirits who hunt people who shine. It's not until he meets Abra that he fucking steps up to the plate and says, I'm going to fucking kill these fucking soul eaters.
Yes. Yeah, because he's been afraid of it his entire life and he's hidden from it.
Right.
So anyway, Billy takes Dan to like an AA group meeting when Dan tells the group leader that the group leader's finished making his speech. He goes to walk out and Dan walks up to him and grabs him and says, you left your watch near the soap dispenser by the sink. And the guy goes, what? So the next day, he asked Dan to come into his office and he shows him the watch. He goes, I found it exactly where you said it was. How did you know that I left it there? And Dan doesn't really say, because Dan's like, oh, I don't know. But he knows that if he tells people, he doesn't want to be questioned. He doesn't, he just wants to help people, but he doesn't want, he just wants to do it and then walk away, basically. He doesn't want to have a conversation about it. He just wants to fucking don't question me, just listen to what I'm saying. But that's not, because people are intrigued by his ability because not a lot of people kind of have it. So anyway, this guy really likes Dan. And he offers it. He goes, do you have a job yet? He goes, oh, not really. And he said, there is a job opening at a hospital as an orderly. Now, with a psychic ability, the last place you want to work is a fucking hospital. The last place. But working at the hospital actually helps Dan come out of his shell a little bit more. So, again, it was a beautiful plot point by Mike Flanagan, story-wise.
It was an absolute beautiful plot point by Mike Flanagan, but I really like how Mike gives the older version of Danny Torrance a sort of safe space to actually use his ability for good and actually help the people who are dying and the people who need it the most.
Yes. So the cinema girl, the one with Rose, the one I don't like, wakes up. I love this dialogue. It's a short
She fucking sucks.
She fucking sucks. I love this dialogue. She wakes up and Rose is there and she says, I felt like I was dying. And Rose says, you did. And then the cinema girl asks if she goes, am I still human? And Rose looks at her and says, do you care? And I'm like, oh, okay. It's like, Do you know? I don't know how to answer that. Yes, no, I don't know. I love that dialogue. I love it. I love it. I love it. So it's basically saying you're not, without saying you're not.
It's a great way to sort of, enhance the character played by Rebecca Ferguson, and it's a great way to show the true intentions of discount fucking soul eating Jen Lindley and get down to the true matter of her fucked up soul. She doesn't fucking care.
No, she doesn't care. So Dan is at the hospital working at night when he sees the local cat that lives at the hospital go into a room, and he follows it, and we see an old man in the bed, and the cat's jumped on the bed with the old man. And the old man says to Dan he's going to die because the cat always goes to the person who's next in line to die. Now Dan tries to calm him as the man begins to panic about dying. And then Dan uses his ability to telepathically tell him it's okay. And the man settles down, he calms down, and then the old man says, I can see my wife, and then breathes out a sort of smoke, which we have seen previously in the bottle or in the canister that Rose had. So now, again, not telling, showing us, because it's the same substance. We're like, oh, it's the soul. They're soul eaters. So the thing is, Dan has a beautiful gift, but he doesn't know how to control or use it.
Dan Torrance almost comes off as a angel of mercy in this scene. It's so wonderful that Mike gave him this moment and showed him what his power can be used for if he cleans up and if he begins to trust himself. It's such a wonderful scene. And I also love how it informs the story. Those members of the audience who may be potentially watching this movie and not fully understand what these fucking Death Eaters actually take from their victims. It's the soul. So it's a great way to, once again, show, don't tell.
Yes. So Dan gets home back to his apartment and sees the word hello written on the wall. And he's like, huh? And then he goes and he writes hi. And then we cut to Abra, who's lying in bed giggling. Again, Mike never tells us. He just goes, we're just like, oh, Abra wrote it on. But how did she write it on his, huh? And that's it. But that's a setup. It's a beautiful, beautiful setup. Thoughts?
I really love how Mike establishes in this movie that individuals who shine and who are at a specific power level are connected.
Yes.
And that concept alone should carry you home.
So now we've got another title card 8 years later. Dan is now sober and still works at the hospital. And he's talking with a patient and the cat is on the bed. But this time, Dan is a lot more at ease. He's a lot more comfortable with talking to the man about death. And basically, he says to him, it's nothing to fear, it's okay. And he's a lot more understanding. So we can see his growth, because in the previous scene, he was so scared about saying something wrong or saying something that might panic him or go against his belief system or whatever it was, that he was just like, he didn't know what to do. But him being in that environment has made him a lot more comfortable with his abilities and how to relate to people and how to speak to people. So I love the arc of him.
It's an absolute wonderful arc. And I really, really love Dan basically coming into his own. If he uses the power that he's given correctly, and if he learns to forgive himself, and if he can actually help people who really, really need it, or AKA people who are near death.
Dan gets home to see another word written on his wall. Morning. And then Dan writes back, school. And we see an older Abra. Now, when I say older, she's about maybe like 11, 12, smiling in her bed, because it's 8 years later, remember. So now we're with Rose and her crowd. And this is where we learn, I mean, we've already told you, but this is in the movie where we learn that this crew searches out people with abilities to either recruit or kill, and they eat their souls. But they're having a bit of trouble finding people because every single person in the group has a unique ability that can be used, and they track people with abilities. And like I said, they either recruit them or they kill them. But because, and I love this, because the Crow actually says because of the modern times, it's actually dampening people's abilities. Social media, streaming services, all of the distractions that we've got. People aren't using their abilities like they used to, so it's taking a back seat to every distraction in life. So they're finding it hard to track people. I love that.
I love that as well. I love the way that Mike Flanagan uses society being numbed by violence and society being numbed by social media to inform the villains of this movie. It's so well done. And I also love how the basic soul eaters in this film only go after children.
They go after children because children are pure. So now we've got another title card. We're in Adair, Iowa. And this scene, Mike really fucking goes there. He's just like, let's just fuck this kid up. let's just fucking fuck this kid up. Oh my God. It was difficult to watch. Oh my God. So there's a young boy, maybe 8, 9, and he's playing baseball. And some guys that are watching are basically saying, oh, this kid, he's going to grow up to be like an amazing baseball player. It's like he can read the pitcher's mind. Well, one of Rose's, cronies, the Crow, is sitting there listening because, as we know, they search out kids with abilities. So the little boy is walking home. Now, this is what I found strange. He's walking home like, where are his parents? Why are his parents not there? He's like by himself, like near a cornfield. Anyway, I'm going to let that go, Mike, because it's the only thing that doesn't fucking make sense. So anyway, he's walking home by himself during the day and a van pulls up and they basically kidnap him. They take him to an old like construction site. They hold him down and Rose, and he's screaming and they're all surrounding him. And Rose gets out the canister and she says, fear makes the steam stronger. Rose basically cuts into him and the steam, the screams get stronger, the steam comes out more, and they're all breathing it in like addicts. Like it's really like I said, it's disturbing. It's really fucking disturbing. Abra wakes up and can feel the boy's pain because she's very psychically connected to people with abilities. So she starts screaming as if they're doing it to her. Then Dan's wall breaks and written on it is, well, he sees the reflection in the mirror, red rum. We know where that's from. Dan goes to the wall and says, who? Because for those of you that don't know, red rum is murder backwards, right? So he goes to the wall because he can communicate with this girl via the wall. He says, who? And then we see baseball boy comes up. So we go back to Rose and she says that we had a looker. They could feel Abra looking in on them because they've all got abilities and they can feel other people with abilities, which means, yeah, she felt what Abra saw they did. And Rose says whoever it was, their steam is huge. So now it kind of puts a bullseye on Abra's back because now they want Abra's steam. But that whole scene was fucking disturbing. It was disturbing.
I love how this scene really drives a point home to the audience. You do not fucking mess with these soul eaters. I mean, to kill a child while Rebecca Ferguson is carving this poor child alive and he's screaming for dear life. I love the way that I love how he intercuts between what Rebecca Ferguson's cronies are doing back to Abra and then to Danny. It's so well cut. This scene is terrifying and it's so well done from a artistic standpoint.
Yeah. So Dan is at home and he writes on the wall, hope you're okay, your friend Dan. We switch to Abra and she's at school and she can read the other kids' minds. Now, question, is this an ability that you would like? Would you like to be able to read people's minds?
It would actually make me sad because the only true vestige of true privacy that is left in this world is your own head. To have the ability to go into other people's heads to find out what they really think of us, it could work to our advantage, but it could also drive us insane.
Yeah, once upon a time I would say, yeah, I'd love that ability. I wouldn't because you don't know what's in people's heads. You don't know the darkness. And you don't want to know. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to know if someone hates me. I'd rather just live in ignorance is bliss. I don't care. So while Abra is at school, she starts looking up missing children on the computer. and finds the baseball boy's picture and name. So, and I love this. I love how he films this. Oh my God, oh my God, I love it. Okay, I'm going to stop and I'm going to explain. So she looks at his picture and taps into his energy and basically starts to have a vision of where he was taken and where he was killed. And now she finds herself in a supermarket and she doesn't know where she is and she doesn't know how she got there. And now we see Rose pushing a trolley with food in it. And Rose keeps looking behind her as if she can feel something, but she can't see Abra. And she's like, okay, this is weird. And then, so Rose picks up on this and telepathically, she realizes someone is there, the same girl from before. She telepathically reaches out to Abra. This scares Abra because Abra's only like 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever. She has no control over what she's doing. She doesn't know that other people can reach out to her. She thinks she's the only one that she can do it. Like, she shouldn't really be playing around with this anyway, although it would be fun. So this scares Abra, and it scares her so much that her psychic energy actually pushes Rose back, like slides Rose back all the way to the end of the aisle and to the ground. And Rose is like, oh my God. So what we learn is that Abra is super, super powerful. And we find out that she's actually more powerful than Rose. But the one thing I want to bring up about this, Rose is my favorite character in the movie. She's the leader of the group, but why is she the leader? And we never actually see her true potential and power. We don't. We see Dan's, we see Abra's, but we only see Rose use her powers a few times. So we don't get a scope of, is she powerful or is she just like the leader of the group and they just follow her because maybe she was the first one? That's what I mean. I want more information on them.
That goes to your bigger problem of the way that Mike layered these characters. If you construct villains that serve the story that you want to tell, knowing how these villains got this way isn't necessary. And I believe that philosophy applies to this movie.
So Abra gets on a bus to go see Dan and she finds him. And he says, how did you find me? And she says she has a GPS in her head to him. That makes sense. Because she's connected to him. So she can follow his energy wherever he is. That totally makes sense. And Abra asks, are there a lot of people that can do what we do? And Dan says he calls it the Shining. And he's only met a few other people who can do it. Abra wants to track down the people that killed the boy, but Dan is against it, saying they are dangerous and not to be messed with because he's scared. He's scared. He doesn't know how, again, to control his ability, and he doesn't know how strong he actually is. But Abra actually, during the rest of the movie, shows him how strong he is.
And I love how, from a storytelling perspective, this takes the character of Danny Torrance and slowly backs him up against the wall. Mike has been doing this the whole movie by dropping hats on the ground or dropping little crumbs leading to that wall. This is truly Danny Torrance's come to Jesus moment. Because if Danny Torrance did not agree to help Abra, there's no fucking way that little girl would have survived against the Soul Eaters.
No way. Dan's at work and Dick the Ghost comes back to warn him about the group, the Soul Eater group. He says they track people like him, like Danny. And I love this. This dialogue is so good. He says they eat screams and they drink pain. They've noticed Abra and you can't let them get her. And I'm like, dialogue off the hook, Mike. I love it. This is probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie. And I loved how he filmed it. Rose goes into a meditation and she astral projects. And the way Mike films this is cray-cray. She basically floats across the earth searching for Abra, searching for her energy, like a dog with a bone, and then finds it and goes like Superman, like over the city. But it doesn't look stupid. It looks legit. And she goes over the cities and she goes and she lands in front of Abra's house. Now she floats up to the window, and Mike does this weird camera trick where he like turns it upside down. If I was in the movie, I would like, I'm gonna be sick. But because I was watching it at home,
Yeah.
I wasn't. I was like, that's cool. So he kind of rotates the camera, and then she goes into Abra's house. And it looks like Abra is sleeping. And she's walking around her room, and then she basically says, "Oh, I can get into your mind. You can't get into my mind." And basically villainy stuff.
Yeah, villain.
But Abra is ready for her and is stronger than Rose. And Rose is not expecting it. And basically she fucks Rose up. She fucks her up. Because Mike films it in a way where there are these little boxes on the wall, and they represent memories. So Rose puts her hand in one of the boxes and tries to like find out stuff about Abra, but Abra sees her there and basically jams her hand in one of the boxes. Rose can't move, and then Abra goes into Rose's mind and goes and finds out all this information. Meanwhile, Rose is like trying to get away. She can't get away because Abra's got a hold of her. It's such a cool scene because they're both astral projecting, and it's all done on the 4D plane, and anything is possible. It's like all the rules of gravity is like out the window. Anything is possible.
Abra basically she set up the most psychotic magic trick ever.
Yes. Yes.
It was absolutely wonderful. And my favorite part is when Rose basically flies through the clouds and goes into Abra's room. But as Rose goes into Abra's room, Mike tilts the camera to do his signature camera move. I absolutely love it. It is absolutely wonderful. But it also shows you that Abra is not fucking around. It's such a wonderful scene.
It is. And then Abra, just with her telekinetic power, her abilities, flings Rose across the world back into her body, which makes Rose, like, because she's sitting on top of her trailer, like her physical body flings off of the trailer and onto the ground. And it's just like, whoa. Okay, Abra's pretty fucking powerful. Now, Abra telepathically links with Dan and tells him what she did, and she's all excited and that she got in her head and everything because she's a kid. She doesn't know. Dan, on the other hand, is like, fuck. Abra's like, look what I did. But I love that. I absolutely love how she hands Rose's ass. That's what she does.
Abra is billed as the most powerful person who can shine in this movie. But the fact that she's a kid shows her naivete.
Mm.
I love that Mike sets her up as the most powerful person who can shine in this movie, but he still manages to use her age as a hindrance to her powers.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So Abra shows Dan and Billy where the baseball boy's body is by astral projecting herself into Dan's car, into the back seat, basically giving him directions. Billy doesn't know what's going on. Billy can't see Abra, but Dan has kind of confessed everything to Billy, and Billy's just kind of taken a leap of faith going, okay, well, either you're crazy or you're telling the truth. So she directs them to the construction site where the body is, and Dan and Billy find the body exactly where Abra said. Now, Rose and the others they got to track Abra because they're like, fuck this, we got to track her because she's so powerful. The crow tells Rose to stay put because Rose is the one that Abra can track. And if Rose goes with them, then Abra will see them coming. So Dan tells Abra to tell her parents that they're coming because Dan is like, listen, you fucked her up. They're going to hunt you, fun, until they come and kill your family and you. So he tells Abra, you need to tell your parents everything. You need to tell them that they're coming. So Dan has the baseball boy's baseball mitt that he grabbed at the body and gives it to Abra to tap into the energy that's connected to it and to track them. So they think that she can only tap into Rose, but she's actually tapped into the whole team because of the baseball mitt. And she sees them and she sees that they're coming their way.
I think this is the only time that Mike asks the audience to take a true leap. Because with the whole movie, Abra's parents have always been thinking that their daughter just, suffers from nightmares, but she's never medicated and she's never she's never seen talking to a psychiatrist. Her family just accepts this all throughout the course of the movie, and I find it convenient that the one who is there when Abra fully reveals herself to her parents is her father. Her father just goes with it, and I'm like, yeah, I don't like how that scene is particularly done. That's my only issue with this movie.
Yeah.
I understand why Mike did it, but I would have loved Abra's parents to have a little bit more resistance to that moment.
So Dan drives Abra to the forest, basically setting a trap for the Death Eaters, Soul Eaters, whatever you want to call them. And they show up, and the cinema girl, which we hate, approaches Abra, who is sitting by herself in the forest, and she sticks her with a syringe only to find out that it's a stuffed bunny. So she's tricked them. Shots fire, and basically Dan and Billy kill most of them. They're really cool because it reminds me of like Buffy. Like when you kill them, they kind of like squirm and then turn to dust. Like it's just a really, really cool effect. Again, we don't even know what the fuck they are. I just want Baxter. Fuck. Just want Baxter. And I'm done. I'm not gonna finish this. Sorry, but you know why? Because they're such cool
they're
villains.
so good.
They're so good. I want to know more about them, and I want to cry because I don't know more. Because it's writing villains is really difficult because
it's hard.
It's harder than writing heroes. Heroes are stock standard. They're the good guys, whatever.
Heroes
but
are
writing villains is good villains.
So hard.
So hard because it's hard to make iconic villains believable and not, mustache twirling idiots, which a lot of them are, unfortunately. So anyway, the bitch cinema girl tells Dan to sleep, and he resists it for a second, but I feel like her ability shouldn't work on him. It shouldn't. I don't know if her ability only works on men. That wasn't set up, but we know her ability doesn't work on Rose. So if it doesn't work on Rose, it shouldn't work on Dan. Why does it work on Dan?
Because Dan has been afraid of facing his true demons, or aka his real power. For the lack of a better word, in real world context, has been framed as a recovering alcoholic.
He hasn't.
That's why it works.
He hasn't honed his ability yet. Basically, this is a real problem for me. This next bit.
What's the problem?
Billy shoots the cinema girl, before the cinema girl can shoot Dan. As she's dying in a beautiful death sequence, she looks at Billy and says, "Kill yourself," which he puts a gun under his chin and blasts his head off. Why? It was not necessary to get rid of Billy. Why? No, Mike, no. I don't care what you're going to say, Marcel. Do not say, well, Mike did it for this. No, it was pointless. It was no. No.
You know what?
It's like, I just have heard it be done ranting and then I'll kick it.
It was pointless. It was absolutely pointless. Because if Billy was willing to believe that Dan's alcoholism was actually something else, why did he get caught up in the moment, and why didn't he fucking stop?
Well,
for half a second, he just had to stop.
But he didn't know that. He knows about Dan's abilities. He doesn't know there are people with abilities that like can control what you do. I just think that made him a waste of a character. Absolute waste. I feel strongly about this, Marcelo.
I'll give you that, because you know what, folks? She's right. It was pointless.
It was pointless. And then we go to Abra, who's actually at her house with her dad, and is confronted by the crow, who gives her a sedative. I don't know who thought it was a good idea to leave her alone in the house with her dad. I don't know why, because if they can track her, I don't know, Marcelo.
Mike, we're finding little pricks in your storytelling. What are you doing?
No, but okay. I'm going to give Mike the benefit of the doubt. Abra, at the back of the van, she's kidnapped. She's dosed up on sedatives, and she can't use her powers. The crow is like, "Yeah, try and use your powers. You can't use them." And then Dan tries to quiet his mind. Now he finds her, and he's in the car. He astral projects himself. He's in the car. Now the crow doesn't notice this, but Abra sees him. And Dan says, "I'm going to try something. Do you trust me?" And she's like, "Yes." So he goes into her body. And the Death Eater that's driving, because Abra starts saying really weird stuff. And the Death Eater's like, the crow is like, "Okay, who is it? Who is this in your body?" And Abra says, as Dan, "The one that killed all your friends." She says something to the effect of, she notices he's not wearing his seatbelt, and she says, "The thing with people that think that they're immortal is they don't wear their seatbelts." And then she psychically basically turns the wheel. They crash into a car. The crow gets thrown out of the fucking front window and dies of excellent death. But it's actually really, really, really cool. Like the CG they use is really cool. But Rose feels it. Rose has feeled. Every time one of the Death Eaters was killed, we switched to Rose, and Rose starts screaming because she's psychically connected to all of them. They're her family, and she screams in absolute pain when the crow, her partner in crime, is killed. So everybody is killed, and she's the last one. It was a really, really cool scene, especially the death of the crow.
It was actually fucking epic. And, and to drive the point home even further, I love the way that Mike intercuts between Rose screaming her head off because essentially her family's dying to the crow going through the fucking windshield of his car because he didn't wear a seatbelt. It's so fucking wonderfully done. It's absolutely wonderfully done.
And
it's so good.
And it's like an after school special of wear your seatbelt. So it's got that in it too. So Dan ends up meeting up with Abra and tells her that Rose is never going to stop coming, so they have to stop her. They're going to a place that's dangerous for people like them, but also dangerous for people like her, and we know where that is. Now, the character arc with Dan is amazing because he would have never done this if it wasn't for Abra. He's doing this to protect her. He's finding his strength within himself because of her, and I love that.
It is absolutely wonderful. And because of all the hats on the ground that Mike has strategically placed in this movie, Dan is finally facing his demons.
This is the last 20 minutes of the movie. So the last 20 minutes of the movie, you get the Overlook Hotel, which, look, at a movie that's 2.5 hours, you can only ask so much of a viewer when you paint a movie as the sequel to The Shining. Most of the movie should have been at the hotel. So Abra and Dan reach the Overlook Hotel, and Dan tells Abra to stay outside and keep watch for Rose because she'll be able to spot the car lights from a mile away. And she says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I have to go into the hotel to wake it up." So they set up right at the beginning that Dan is a beacon for the entities at the Overlook. So when he walks the halls and the lights start coming on and he's not pressed anything, he's not done anything, it just starts waking up because of his light, you know shit's about to go down because it's already set up that all the ghosts are going to come out because they're going to be drawn to him. The only thing that I didn't like was that didn't really happen. It should have, but that didn't. It did because the ghosts that have haunted Danny his whole life, he's put them in boxes in his mind, right? But there's so many more ghosts at the Overlook Hotel because the Overlook Hotel is fucking massive.
I love the fact that Dan is basically a lightning rod for the Overlook Hotel. It's such a cool way to make this broken, destroyed man finally use his demons to do something good. It's absolutely fantastic. I'm not denying that there's amazing things that you could have done in the first 2 acts in the hotel, but the fact that we lead up to the Overlook Hotel and the Overlook Hotel plays a giant part in the 3rd act of this film, I can forgive because this film was so expertly constructed for the first 2 acts.
The Overlook Hotel is the ultimate haunted house movie. You've got over 1,000 rooms that we didn't even discover in The Shining. Parts of it, there's there's sports rooms, ballrooms. Like there's so much more that could have been explored that wasn't in The Shining. I thought, I'm not saying the movie's bad. I love the movie, but I guess I wanted what it wasn't. The bar scene was interesting because there's obviously a bar scene in the original Shining. I haven't seen the original in a long time, so I actually YouTubed that scene to see if there was any similarities, and it's different. There's no Easter eggs at all. It's completely different. It's different subjects, different everything. And I would have liked a callback to the original, maybe in some dialogue. I like the fact that I don't know what his name. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know what the actor's name is. The dad from Haunting on Elliot from E.T. He was playing Jack Nicholson, and I think the makeup that they did on him was like amazing to make him look like shining Jack Nicholson. So I did like that. They did that really well.
The fact that Mike wanted to sort of tip his cap to the Shining in this particular scene was really, really wonderful, but it kind of annoyed me as well that this scene didn't have any more grander significance. I mean, for the whole movie, in his own way, the Danny Torrance is trying to you know, let go of the demons that killed his father and are killing him. So I think that this should have been a bigger moment, but unfortunately it wasn't.
Yes, I agree. So Rose walks into the hotel, cocky as fuck, and we get a few Easter eggs here. She looks at the elevator doors and the blood comes out just like in the original. She kind of smiles. It's not really happening. She's clicking into the psychic energy, so she's seeing what did happen. So I like that little callback. So she sees Dan and Abra, and they're standing in front of her, and then their eyes go white and Rose doubles over in pain. And we go to the snow maze, which is a direct, it's directly from The Shining, the snow maze. And you're like, oh, okay, that was cool. So there are Easter eggs in here. Mike does this beautiful pullback shot from above. So you can see the scope of the maze. You see it's like, you would be in there for weeks trying to figure out how to get out. It's just amazing. And it's kind of like a showdown between Rose and Abra. Abra's kind of talking. Abra's like 10 years old, right? She's talking shit to Rose and she keeps running past her, like slicing the back of her fucking knee. But Rose can't catch her, except when Rose kind of goes into it and she puts her arm out and she catches Abra and she pulls her up and she's saying, villain stuff. I didn't write down the dialogue. But I love this because Rose realizes you're distracting me. But behind Rose, it's beautiful. There's this massive box, and we know it's from Danny's mind because it's a Danny box that he holds the ghosts in. It looks like a coffin. It's coming really, really slowly. It's actually really creepy behind Rose. But as the box kind of gets to Rose, Rose clicks out of it and wakes up. But it was really eerie, and I liked the plan. But it didn't work. But I liked the plan. It was cool.
Yeah, listen, I love the way that Abra basically toys with Rose, and basically Abra comes off to me as basically a shark playing with her prey before she eats them. She eats before the shark eats the prey. But I also love that Mike does, he picks up the hat off the ground from before with these boxes. It's just a lovely, lovely way to introduce to set up your final showdown between your hero and your villain.
Okay, I have an issue with this scene. No, sorry, Marcelo, I have an issue. Look, now it's time for the face-off between Rose and Dan. Rose is obviously way more powerful. And so she holds Dan down and she's looking she can go into his mind. Now, she sees he has a lot of these locked boxes and she's intrigued. And she says, oh, is that something special? And Dan says, no, they're starving. And he goes inside his mind and at once he unlocks all the boxes. And then all the ghosts, like from the original Shining, appear, including the twins, and basically kill Rose. Very, very horrifically, but it's very, very well done. What I find funny about this scene is Dan just watches and I'm like, get the fuck out of there. Because as soon as they're done with her, they're going to turn on you. And he's like watching. I'm like, Dan, get your ass up and fucking skedaddle. And I'm like, why are you watching? And then, of course, the ghosts are done with Rose. Rose is dead and they turn on him. I'm like, why? Why did you? You have to watch? You have to just what? Watch, make sure. That's not what bugged me about the scene, though. I was just like, whatever.
No,
What?
it's not.
No, it's not.
What is it?
Because that had to happen for like the next scene to happen. What bugged me is the showdown between Rose and Dan was lackluster at most. You've got these psychic entities and it's just like, bow. Dan, through this movie, Dan should have come into his power. So you can have a showdown of psychic abilities on the fourth dimension between Rose and Dan.
Oh.
That's what it should have been. Not, I get the unlocking the boxes, but that should have been a last resort. But there should have been a fight, a psychic fight, like before when Abra had Rose and there was like she locked her hand in the thing and there was like a showdown. It should have been like that. And that would have been fucking awesome. And that's not what we got. It was just lackluster. It was like you're supposed to have this big villain fight at the end. And it wasn't a fight. Dan didn't do anything. Dan just unlocked the boxes and the ghost killed Rose. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you get it?
You're right.
I know I'm right. I wanted to see a psychic showdown. And no, I didn't get it. I want it. Mike, go back. Because the whole movie, Dan is hiding his ability. He never actually stands in his strength. He never gets to the abilities that we know he has. And for a hero to start out as nothing, like imagine you've got a dance movie where someone is not good. By the end of the movie, you want them to be like perfect, right? But we never got that with Dan.
Yeah.
We never even know how powerful he could have been because it was just like, bomb, gone.
She's right. From a storyteller's perspective, you want to take your hero and you want to build him up for the third act. And when we get to the third act, you should see the hero come with into his own and defeat the villain. I think the true main character of this film is Abra.
Yes.
It's not Danny Torrance.
Yeah.
And that's why Mike had Danny Torrance be so lackluster.
So basically the ghosts turn on Dan and basically get in his head because he's not powerful. Because he wasn't built up to be powerful, so they can take him over really fucking easily. Anyway, Abra sees Dan, who is taken over by the ghosts. She's running through the Overlook Hotel and runs into room 237. Well, we know 237, that's a setup from the very, very, like, one of the first scenes where when Danny was a boy, he saw the old woman in the room 237. So she walks into the room and Abra looks over at the bathtub and sees the same old woman, crusty fucking ghost Dan did in the first scene when he was a boy and when it was in his house. And I love this. Abra looks over at her and she says, try it. Like a boss. And I'm like, damn.
Boss bitch.
She's a boss bitch. Dan walks in with an axe, just like his father, kind of Jack Torrance, and tries to swing it at Abra, but she stops it kind of psychically. She says, Dan made a stop at the boiler room before. And then the ghosts release him. And I'm like, okay, what did he do? I didn't know what the fuck was he doing and why did the ghosts release him for 2 seconds? They released him, Abra ran away, and then they overtook him again. It wasn't shown what he did in the boiler room. It showed a scene where he walked into the boiler room before, but it didn't show what he actually did. So for the ghosts, that was supposed to be a moment, but instead it was a what? What was he doing in the boiler room? So I'm not done with this fucking scene. Dan is retaken over by the ghosts and he goes to the boiler room, and this is where I got fucking confused. Because I'm like, oh, this will explain it. This will 100% explain what he did in the boiler room. Apparently the boiler catches fire and then the room ignites. Dan is on his knees. This is actually really sweet. Dan is on his knees. There's no way out, and he sees Mike pans over and his mum is there, and then he pans back and it's like little Dan and she's got her hand on his face, and it's actually really, really, really sweet. And then we switch to Abra and she watches the hotel burn from the outside. The issue that I have is he goes down to the boiler room and the boiler just like randomly catches fire and then the room ignites and the hotel burn. What did he do in the boiler room?
He rigged the boiler room to explode.
yes, he could have rigged it, but we didn't see him do it. Abra is in her room and she's talking to Dan, and you're like, oh, he made it out. And he tells her, look, when they met, he told her to hide her shine, but that was wrong. And he says, shine on. And he smiles at her. So we realize at that moment, Dan died at the hotel and she's talking to his ghost, just like Dan was talking to the ghost Dick at the beginning of the movie, which is a nice callback. It's a nice round circle. It complements the opening nice from when Danny was a child. Abra walks down the hallway to the bathroom where the old woman ghost, the old naked, gross, corpse-like ghost, is sitting in the bathtub. She walks in, closes the door behind her, basically doing the exact same thing that Dan did when he was a kid. Because Abra has been in the hotel, she's now the beacon that they're attracted to. So it's basically like the story is repeating. I loved it. I loved the ending. I loved the movie came full circle. I liked it a lot.
I love the fact that this movie essentially began with young Danny Torrance putting his demons into boxes. And I love it how it ends with Abra being the beacon that these ghosts go after now. And I love how she replaced Dan, and Dan can essentially rest, for the lack of a better word.
I wouldn't mind, because Dan and Rose had a conversation where Dan says, you're the last one, and Rose goes, you think I'm the last one? I'm not. I would like a movie where Abra actually, her life, basically, she tracks down people like Rose and kills them. I would love that as a movie.
Yeah, that would be... would you like to go to your trivia?
I'd love to.
Go.
Mike painstakingly recreated the sets from the Overlook Hotel using blueprints from Stanley Kubrick's estate.
Oh my God. I absolutely love the attention to detail that Mike has in all of his films. Like, it's absolutely wonderful that a storyteller of his caliber goes in deep with all of his projects, because that shows that he really cares.
Yeah, unfortunately, it was only the last 20 minutes of the movie, which I'll never get over. Next trivia. Maybe this will explain it. I don't know. Stephen King didn't want to have the Overlook Hotel in Dr. Sleep at all, because he didn't like Stanley Kubrick's take on it. Mike eventually convinced him to give him permission to use the Overlook Hotel in the movie.
Stephen's point of view makes sense, because we all know this. But only Mike could have convinced Stephen King to allow him to use the Overlook Hotel. But because the third act is so choppy, I'm like, Mike, was it such a good idea that you convinced him to use it? Or like,
well, you know my stance.
Yeah.
Should have been more.
Yeah. I do. I do. It should have been more. So it does not make me feel better about this third act.
No. The cat from the hospital that kept sitting on people's beds, knowing when they're going to die. The cat's name in the movie was Azzy. And Dan actually calls him by name Azzy a few times. Now, Azzy is short for Azrael, and Azrael is the angel of death.
I like that. Mike gave significance to a cat.
That's why we love him. We love, but it could be from it could be from the book though. So it could be Stephen's doing.
Yes, it could be, but still. In the context of this conversation, all the credit goes to Mike.
Yes. My last piece of trivia is Chris Evans, Matt Smith, and Jeremy Renner all met with Mike about the role of Dan.
No, and no.
No.
Ewan McGregor.
No. Jeremy Renner, Chris Evans, yes, absolutely.
Okay. I will go with you on that one.
Yeah, I think Chris Evans would have done a great job.
I will definitely go with you on that one.
That's it. I'm out. Bye-bye.
All right, guys, that'll do it for this edition of the Mixtape Podcast. Listen, if you guys have comments or questions for us, you can reach out to us by using our email. It's themixtapepod@aol.com. But if you like this episode and you want to come back next week, we'll be talking about a 90s classic. We'll be talking about the film Anaconda. So, with that being said, for my fellow co-host, Dean Stark, I shall simply say, if someone is ever kind enough to make you a mixtape, that must truly mean that they love you.
The Mixtape Podcast is a Balloonhead Productions presentation.